Gifted and talented programming. Is it good for our kids? Does it lead to further marginalization? Our team is coming on, but I just want y'all to know this is going to be a very, very fun show. And before we even get to them, this show was produced by Miss Jubilee Ransom. Come back on the other side. Go. What's up, everybody? That's David. That's Jubilee. Our guy Omar is on the road and moving around, but hopefully he'll be able to join us. But before we hop into this incredible topic brought by Miss Jubilee, let us check in. David, how you doing, man?
Doing well. Thanks for asking. Excited. I don't have any really we don't have too many major updates, but just glad to be here with both of you. Hoping that Omar can join, and I'm really excited to jump into this topic, both at the what's happening in 2023 level. Also, share a little bit about my own personal experience with GATE and accelerated coursework. When I was a K-12 student way back in the day. So yeah, that's it.
Hey man, I can't wait to hear about it, man. Miss Jubilee, how you doing?
I am doing much better than I was last Friday.
Oh, were you upset last Friday? Was something happening?
Oh my goodness, yeah. I this time last week was not. It was no. I wasn't okay. But I have recouped and I'm back, and I gave my feedback to the school and to the assistant superintendent and to the family engagement. You
gave your feedback to them?
What'd you say?
You gave them feedback? Because I don't know if you was in feedback energy last week, but
oh no, I wasn't. It took me a few days to come down from there, but then when I came down, I wrote a 6-page letter citing the policies and procedures of Administrative Protocol 5132 because you just ain't gonna do that to me. But I'm good. I got a couple of new contracts through a client that's really in federal diversity work. So I'm really excited about that. And yeah, it's just been a really great, productive, very layered, very busy week. And I'm happy to be with you.
That's what's up, man. And before we throw it back to you, I've been good. I've been going nonstop. I've been away from my house since the 1st until late last night. I am here for a few days and then I am back on the road. I've been to a few different things where we were doing some work, got to spend time in Austin, beautiful 84-degree weather, and then came back here to snow flurries, which was awesome. I had a sweatsuit on yesterday, so I was I was too hot in in Austin, and then my little sweatsuit, Chicago slapped it around when I got off the plane. But I'm very happy to see you all. I am tired today, but it's a good tired. It is a good accomplished tired. There's a lot of stuff that I'm working on, and that includes some of you all, some of it doesn't. But it's just a lot of work to do, and it feels like we're in the fourth quarter on some stuff. And I played ball, and so you get that extra bit of adrenaline and competitive nature. But I am excited today. You want to know why I'm excited today, Jubilee?
Why?
Because Jubilee Ransom has produced this show, and all David, as I would say, her Jubilee-ness. She's the only one that can actually ask these questions. So let me go ahead and do this right here. You all look at her, and David and I will be brought in like we are people off the street that know nothing about this topic. But today's show is about GATE programming, gifted and talented programming and education. And, you want to just say a little bit about why that's the topic, and I'll have your first question queued up.
Well, thank you. So, I mean, it's how you launched the show when you said, is gifted and talented education, does it help to accelerate or does it further marginalize brown and Black children. And so this is an issue that's really close to my heart, and that'll come out as we discuss the topic throughout the show. But I just want to lay the foundation for the educators and the non-educators. Hey, gifted education was started a really, really, really long time ago, and it was meant to be special. Right, this broad group of special practices and procedures and theories for the education of children who had been identified as gifted or talented, right? And so what I want to share thus far is there isn't a common way to assess children. Every state, every district has some kind of way that they would like to assess. And I think the question still remains whether or not this has been beneficial for our children, especially Black and brown children, throughout the course of its existence and throughout our nation. So,
okay. Well, thank you for explaining that to us. So, if anybody has any thoughts or feelings about gifted and talented, go ahead and drop those in. But she gave us some questions, so we're gonna let you drive on this. We got your stuff in order. You go right ahead.
I'm going to answer last because you think you know what I'm going to say.
I don't. Well, this is what I think. I don't think I know what you're going to say, right? I think that we've done this enough. I think that I've been trying to get my footing because it's me and Omar and David. It's three dudes and we kind of talk to each other a certain way. I'm like the baby of the group. David is like my OG. And Omar is like the person who gets to travel the world. So we all have a good sense of where people are going to land. And then you come in and you just throw roses and flowers everywhere. And it's just like, it's just all going to get along and be great. So the first question out the gate that you picked, are all kids talented? Yes. Brava. And
I want to know.
David.
Through my career, I've been surprised at some of the answers that I've gotten here.
Yeah.
Right? And so, So Dave, kick it off. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I think the challenge there is that when you have the big, large, for the most part, maybe 90% of our education systems are more or less like a round hole and a round shape that goes into it. It's kind of a one size fits all. So in those kinds of systems, it's hard to then recognize what I like to call the diversity of the gifts that children bring. We think of oftentimes, traditionally thinking, we think of gifted students, and we think students that do their work, they turn it in on time. They're well spoken. They have good analytical skills. Behavior plays a part in it for sure. And I feel like when we say, are all children gifted and talented, I say yes. I think our systems, for the most part, fail to actually hold a spotlight onto, the full spectrum of what gifted and talented means. And I'm talking about everything from, mainstream students to special education students. I think oftentimes with special ed education, you see it, we don't like to talk about data. There's a lack of rigor in these programs. And I think there's a whole world there in special education that we could talk about when we talk about gifted and talented, that we don't talk about enough. And I think special education students, it means that they have a special way of learning and a special way of demonstrating what they have learned. That is a gift. That is a talent. So I'll open up with that.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think Jubilee said something similar that I do agree with, is that what does gifted and talented mean? I think every child, every person, God has bestowed something of value in that person. And I do not think that our school system is able to weed that out and say what that is. So I think all kids have a talent. I think they all have a gift, but I'll tell you what I think gifted and talented programs are. And I'll even do the screen like this so nobody has to bear the brunt of my answer. I think gifted and talented programs are public schools mea culpa. I think it is the admission that we are not doing this well in mass. So there's 10 to 15% of kids that we see that we deem that has some potential and should not be held back by our incompetence or lack of funds or resources or everything in between those two things. And this is the group of kids, this 10 to 15% that we are going to lay our hat on. These are the kids that are going to go far and going to be successful because we're going to put everything we have in them, and we're going to take responsibility for those kids. We're gonna say we built that kid, and the other 85% that are getting mediocre to less than stellar to downright terrible education, we will blame that on the system. That's what I think that gifted and talented programs are. I don't see them going away, and I do think that I know for a fact in my situation how I almost within a week, I've told this story and I won't do it right now until Jubilee leads us there, but how I went from being, on track to be in a special, like deemed special education, to in the same week being tracked into gifted and talented. And I can see the different paths of my life. I think that that's a lot of power for an entity that doesn't like to take accountability and responsibility to have. So that's my answer, my long-winded answer. But I didn't, was that okay, Jube? I didn't put your face on the screen when I said
no, let me tell you something. You may not believe this, but I actually agree with you.
Oh, here. Okay.
And given that you kind of made a really a great point in terms of just the comparison between special ed and gifted and talented, and the fact is that they're along the same continuum, right? And so this is a looming question, right? So it's like, how many babies have ended up being in special education when they really needed to be, right, just challenged more, right? Maybe they needed more differentiation. They didn't need to necessarily get an IEP, right, and be classified. But I think because of these different distinctions, so many kids get lost in the cracks. Again, because we don't have clear ways to distinguish what's what and who's who. And so I agree with you. I think it does have to do with resources and all of that, but I'll save that for when we get to like programming. But I agree. I think all kids are gifted and talented, and they are born that way. I just think that the public school system doesn't have a way of identifying intelligences that fall outside of cognitive abilities, right? So like, and I'm leaning towards Gardner's whole multiple intelligences, right? We've got so many of them: linguistic, logical, mathematical. We've got verbal, we've got bodily, spatial, the list goes on. But there's no way to really, that's not inculcated in the school system's way of assessing intelligence, right? And so it's like, okay, so if you're quote unquote word smart, or if you are number reasoning smart, right? You thrive in logical, mathematical intelligence, then we consider you to be gifted and talented. But what about if you have interpersonal intelligence, musical intelligence, interpersonal intelligence? What happens if you are a naturalist? We don't have ways of assessing that. And so you don't get the cookie. You don't get the cookie because we're not able to figure out the way in which you can demonstrate your intelligence in this system, in this
right. So yeah, you're going from like a one size fits all to like a two size fits all. It's like a binary system of gifted, AP, advanced coursework. And so I think going back to, Charles mentioned it earlier, he says gifted and talented programs aren't going away. Well, they actually are going away in some systems because of this thing that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, this concept of like meritocracy, right? Like, if all the kids can't be AP kids, then none of them can be AP kids or advanced students. And I think that's a problem too, because if you start watering down your curriculum and your course offerings, and you take away the advanced coursework without doing anything different, you're removing opportunity from children, right? And so I think, the idea of, I fully support gifted, talented programs, advanced coursework, but I do think we have to be more flexible when we think about it, because you're either in the regular course or you're in the advanced program. There's so many children that would flourish in between, right?
Yeah.
But we don't have that option. It's just like you're either here or you are there. And so I don't know if this can be done, without blowing up the entire system, opening up education to like true personalization where you're moving towards like a more proficiency or competency based system where students can thrive in the particular areas where they can really push themselves, right? And not necessarily along this like linear trajectory. I'll leave it there. I want to get into the Montessori piece in a little while, but because I thought that was very fascinating. But yeah, Omar, welcome.
Hi, Omar. I'm on the other side of what you said, Dave. Like I don't really support it because I think it's an equity problem, honestly. And I don't know that I care about the fact that you can do so much for the 15%, but you still haven't figured out what to do with the 85%. Like that's whack to me. And like in my own journey, when I took over the school that I ran, we did a whole data analysis poll, walk through all the classrooms or whatever. And what I found was that teachers were great at doing intervention, right? Pulling kids to the small, into small groups and all of that. Forget about differentiating for those that were high performing, but they sucked, right? Many of them sucked at just basic like tier 1 instruction that was differentiated for the middle rung. And so my thing is, I guess to Charles' earlier point is like, we get really excited when it's like, oh wow, like let's help the high performing kids. Like we don't want them to fall behind, but it's like, but what about the 85%? Like they're constantly forgotten about. And then we give, kudos to, oh, look at these resources that this program is getting. And sometimes even those that are performing below are getting, but what about those that are in the middle? They kind of just get forgotten about. And for me, I just think a good teacher is a good teacher is a good teacher is a good teacher. And that teacher is able to differentiate and teach for every level in the classroom. Now, whether or not it's always feasible, whether or not the skill set is there, the training is there, the time is there, that's another conversation. But I do feel like that needs to be an expectation.
This is one of the benefits of No Child Left Behind. People talk about the evils of No Child Left Behind, but if you ran a school under No Child Left Behind and the way that they ranked schools and generated your API score, academic performance index, was a number that came out of the system, right? And you were either 500.
I missed that number.
Right? I mean, so I was running a school at that time, and there was not a heavy emphasis on the 15%. The emphasis, and it was an accountability system, but the emphasis was to actually support students that were underperforming, in the low performing ranges and moving them up, as opposed to, supporting gifted and talented students. So that's like, I just thought about that. This is like we say the other side of the spectrum, but I think it's one of the good things that the legacy of No Child Left Behind has left behind.
And I want to make sure we bring our brother in, and as we do it, I want to just say the question that we were first asked, Omar, was, are all kids gifted? And of course we all say yes. Now let me, for the people that's watching, right? That's like, of course y'all gonna say that because you're educators. These are educators, and it's career suicide to say no, right? Like it is. No, right? But I think that there are people at home that's like, you out your damn mind. Like some kids are, some kids are not. Here's what the thing is though, right? I do live in more reality in the sense of I think Julie made a great point on where we should get to, and that schools should do this and things kind of in the future. I think the reason why I would never want to see gifted and talented programs go away is because I have no evidence that tells me that if those programs go away, that certain schools will have a modicum of like just a little bit of quality, like a little bit of like, we're going to make this happen. And I will say those classes are different. There are in most schools, especially high schools, middle schools and elementary schools too, but there are multiple schools inside of your school. There's a school within a school. So if you lived in Oakland and you went to Oakland Tech, and Oakland Technical High is one of the most popular public schools there. They just had the game for the state championship. It was Oakland High versus Oakland Tech. I think Oakland High beat them to go to the state championship. Congratulations to both those teams for representing Northern California. But if you were in the Paideia program, you have a very, very, Paideia is like a very special, gifted and talented program inside of Tech. It's very famous. It's been around since I was a kid. You are taking very different classes. The quality of your classes are so different. I was in this thing called the Academy at Emory High School, and the classes in the Academy, they still wasn't great, but the rate of us that were on our way to college versus the rate of the young people that were not in that program is drastic. So, I mean, I just wanted for the people watching at home, you know what I'm saying, for them to be like, okay, y'all are just saying this because you got to and you're educators, but I acknowledge why people fight to have their kids track that way. Omar, how you doing, man?
What's up, y'all? It's good to see you.
What's going on?
I missed y'all immensely, man. Can y'all hear me?
We can. We just, you know, we just figured like you was on Uranus, you was on Venus, like we had you on a different planet last time, man. How you doing?
I've been all over the place, man. I've been tracking the storm. It's like the endless winter. I've been skiing all over the place. It's been badass living that Bruce Wayne life that you talk about so much, man. I was like, you said that the other day, and I was like, maybe I should start living the life that Doc thinks that I'm living. So I have. Now I'm in Los Angeles right now, in Claremont for a wedding. But hearing everything that you all just said, look, I think that the fact that like it was
robot.
Yeah, you got the robot voice, man.
I got robot voice.
You got the robot voice, and we got to mess with you like I mess with Jubilee. And turn your phone around when you get a chance. But we got you, man. You go from this to that. But we'll come back to you because you got the robot voice. So if you can get some service, we couldn't really hear you and make it out.
Yeah, you need some 5G in your life, homie.
You need some gifted and talented service.
It's always becoming a survival of the fittest. That's what it is.
Yeah, hey man, people trying to survive out here in these streets. Like this is why I like the show though, right? Because I do think you remind me of our friend Sharif right now, like because he's very he's good at system dynamics, right? He's good at what it should be. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. We need people like you that think like that. Like, I think you can't just have people like me that's in the moment, right? I think you need both, though, right? Like, I think because it's frustrating to hear those beautiful stories and of what could be. And then you go back into that reality and it's not that. And it's just like, I don't know how to survive where I'm at. So I think it's a good question. And I think you laid out some good questions. I'll get your second one up. But what are you saying, David?
This is you brought up an interesting point talking about this school, Oakland Tech, but it could be any school, a large school, probably talking about mainly high schools, right? These programs, you can have two students that attend the same school and they have completely different experiences, right? Exposure to different adults. Probably exposure to different areas of the actual physical building, running around in different social circles, and that's a problem, right? Because then you're running straight into equity issues, right? And then that's a very real thing. I mean, that was part of my own experience growing up and going to school. But I think that's definitely one of the downfalls of having separate programs when you're not being mindful about how the actual student experience throughout the day. You're essentially running segregated programs within the same four walls of a school.
Absolutely.
You're like, that doesn't sound like the same Oakland Tech that I go to, I'm like, well,
right.
Why do I never see you at school? Well, I'm in that other building.
Mm-hmm. I run energy converters, and one of my first cohorts, we had a student. He was a brown student. He was Yemen. He was a student from Yemen, and he did a thing on tracking. And the reason why he wanted to do this joint his research on tracking was he accidentally went into his friend's classroom, and it was the same class. It was I don't remember specifically, but let's say it was a history class, but it was the same level class. And in his class, it was just more like a drill sergeant environment. It was more like, don't do this, whatever. And then he stumbled in his friend's class and he just was in there for a second, but they were having like conversations. Like the teacher was having conversations with them. You know, I think kids had like a latte or something. Like it was just a freer kind of exchange of stuff. And he instantly was like, wait, why am I not in this class? Like, what? Like, ain't this the same like section and same class? And he went all the way back to his elementary experience and was like, yo, I've been being tracked like this entire time. You know what I'm saying? And I think this is something that we're talking about with the GATE program, with an underbed and foundation of like tracking, and how we actually push certain young people through the system in different ways. So, you know, hey man, I always think it's an interesting talk. But back to you, Jubilee.
Can gifted and talented students succeed in schools without gifted programming? Now, I'm over here, I'm like, I don't want to say throw the whole thing away. I don't. I'm very close to it, just because I don't think that it's a good design. I don't know that we needed that, you know. I think it's a crutch, and it's a blanket to put over inadequate education. So what do you think? Do you think that schools need G&T programming, or well, I won't ask a leading question. I'll just leave it out there. What do you think?
Look, this is how the questions was at first. It was like, ain't all kids gifted and talented? I'm like, Jude, we can't. Well, what if we got rid of all of the programs? I'll go so the beard of knowledge / beard of wisdom can clean it up, because mine ain't gonna be that clean. I think that can gift, yeah, sure, yeah, they can survive. They're not gonna die. Like, you know what I'm saying? They're gonna get food and water for the most part. You know what I'm saying? I think that they might die academically. They might die intellectually, like a lot of our kids are now. I think, listen, I get the principle that you're going for. Like, I completely understand that if we got rid of it, I think there's the altruism in some people is like, and you included, right? And I think it's a beautiful thing. I wish I possessed this. I think my heart is just very cold, though. I have to just admit this. But it's like, okay, if we get rid of the programs, then all the boats would be forced to like rise. Like the system would have to address this thing so these people won't be locked in. I just don't think that's the case. I do not think people care about kids the way that like people project to care about kids. It's just not a thing. Like here's, I want you to, I like the face that you're making, because that means I'm touching on something. I love it. Schools are places where kids are supposed to go learn, yes. But public schools are also tend to be a top 3, if not the top, job provider in said area, said city. And I think at that point, you kind of mess with people's jobs. I think people care more about jobs and being able to have good government jobs than kids being able to learn in mass and on whole. I think that you would take that net completely out, it would be very, very bad. And if you don't have a Kuman or like a David or a Jubilee as a parent, or an Omar as a parent, or, you know, that knows how to navigate and knows how to get these skills or whatnot, I don't think that would raise quality. I think that those kids would drown in it. I'll give you examples. 50 Cent may be one of the best business minds of all time. He's reinvented himself multiple times, and however you feel about him, he has taken whatever situation he is in and become a legend, whether it was streets, rap, and now television. This dude was in special ed. He has a line, special ed kid in the back on Ritalin, crib all effed up, house all effed up, like pockets all effed up. Now, homie, what's up, right? Like that guy was looked at by that system and was told that he needed medication and we're going to put you in the back of the classroom. Jay-Z was not recognized well in these schools. Neither was Big. These people became like savants in certain ways, and that's just a closed off space. I think that when you take those programs away, you make the wild even wilder. You make the wilderness even more of a wilderness. And so it's like taking guns away while I'm already on safari with things trying to kill me. So I don't know if I answered or danced around your question. I think that they can survive literally. I don't think that they will be able to. Some survivors will thrive, but I think you lose a lot of kids if you take it away.
Yep.
Go ahead, Dave. I'll go
yeah.
ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I think two things. I think the question is, can these students succeed without these particular types of programs? I think yes and no. I think you referenced one of the pieces looking at Illinois and school districts there that are actually able to offer these programs, and at the same time are mindful around being data oriented to say, like, if we're going to offer these programs, do the students in these programs generally match the demographics of the students in the larger district, right? So you don't see like a racial access gap, right? So it's working. They're intentional about it, right? So there's that. But at the same time, I also think absolutely these students can be successful without these programs. It's not just by removing these programs, but it's really about designing and or redesigning and or rethinking or entirely like blowing up existing programs to, I said it before, move towards more competency or proficiency based learning systems. So moving away from the sage on the stage to systems that are more blended, more personalized. And it means that, like, maybe all the kids aren't going to be doing the same thing at the same time. And that's very unnerving to a lot of educators and school leaders and school systems. You open up what learning looks like in a particular program. And so I think a good example is like, we didn't have any kind of advanced coursework options at either the high school or the elementary school that I ran. The high school was a traditional high school. The elementary TK8 was a Montessori school. And we essentially did the same thing in both programs. We didn't offer multiple tracks. At the high school, we did offer a select number of AP courses, but what we did is we ensured that the regular coursework that all students had access to was rigorous, right? And also provided intense supports for students that needed those within the same context. So it's really like, it's inclusion with really not having anything to do with special education. We're going to put all these students together. When you actually can put students together in a learning environment, some students that you might categorize as, emerging learners and advanced learners, like, they can start to teach one another, right? And there's power in that. In the Montessori program that I worked at, we had a 3.5 hour work block called it's called the work period, right? It's 3.5 hours long. Elementary school kids, they all had their individualized work plans, access to different works, some small lessons, but it was a lot of autonomous work. And within that period, students were able to kind of chart their own path, right? And you don't move forward until you're able to demonstrate competency around a particular work. Like, that's analog in real life, personalized learning, right? And it's not a separate space, it's one space where all the children are together, teaching each other too. So I think, that my answer to that question is yes, and a different answer.
And Juby, coming to you, one of our guests, Miss Taylor, said, remove GATE, but it has to be replaced with a system that doesn't really need GATE. I feel like GATE is just a way to favor the kids the school already likes because they have better grades or behavior. I 1000% agree with what she said. It was a mouthful. Back to you.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, I was a G&T kid, okay?
So you benefited from GATE. You can't do it. Go ahead.
No, you know what I benefited from? I benefited from teachers who gave and fill in the blank, right?
In GATE.
I benefited from strong teachers who cared. I didn't benefit from G&T. You know what I mean? And so maybe that was in the 80s. So maybe the way that, you know, principals hired back then had to do with some kind of skill set that you needed in order to teach that population. But I can't say that I have seen that level of care. And of course, I'm just speaking from what I've seen, only my personal / professional experience. I have seen teachers coast, right? And so my answer to it is, gifted and talented programs are systems, not people. People, meaning teachers, are the ones that make the difference. They are the ones that ensure that students are getting what they need, no matter what level they're on, right? In my AP experience, one day we walked into a classroom. So the school that I helped to run when I was AP, we were the only school in the district that had G&T, only elementary school. So there were people that were busing their kids from here, there, and everywhere just to get to our school, right? And we had a teacher who didn't care. We walked up in there one day. Now these kids, they came in there, they're flying high on state tests. I mean, they're doing great, right? This lady wrote a lesson plan with a piece of, with a pencil when we walked in and tried to give it to us, like, here it is, coasting, okay? Coasting. Why? Because these kids came in because they're high performing, they're well behaved. So what do I have to do? I don't have to push. I don't have to prepare. I don't need to differentiate. All these kids in here already have all fours on the test. So there's nothing for me to do. Right. And so you get that in a G&T program. And what we might as well just sink the whole ship, because here's a person that you would think, oh, this is heightening their awareness. This is motivating them to do more, to do better. No, the teacher's just coasting. So it's not I don't think that the program in and of itself has a motivational factor. I think when a teacher wants to do right by students, when a teacher really cares, they're going to do what they must to make sure that they are serving the children that they have in front of them and giving them what they need, program or not. So my answer is, okay, go ahead. That's it.
You got my brain turning on this. Whenever I could take a shot at seniority, I will. And so I think within, you could look at a particular district. The average district has schools in low income areas and in higher income areas, right? And there's this thing that's called seniority, where teachers that have been in the system longer, have more access to choose like where they teach, right? Oakland is a prime example of that. You cross the 580 freeway, and you can look at their own data, and the average years teaching in the hill schools is almost double in the heartlands of the city, the flatlands. So this is the other issue that Gate and Talented brings up, even within a school building, because you referenced it, Jubilee, and I think Charles, you did too. Like, when you get into some of these programs, it's like, this guy's been teaching longer. And so the students that actually might need teachers that have taught longer and that are more qualified aren't getting those teachers, right? Because they are in these other programs. And what happens is the students that are in the non-gifted and talented programs, they have access to teachers that have fewer years on average of experience. It's like, talk about expanding the opportunity gap and the achievement gap. It's built into the system. And I think that's another issue that we don't talk about it as often enough. It's like, 2 or 3 schools within one building. I might be a teacher, and I'm a gifted and talented, teacher in that program, and Jubilee works in the non-gifted program. I might not even have an opportunity to engage with her professionally, right? We have like different PDs, right? Segregation within the 4 walls, right?
Agreed.
I always got thoughts, but our guy is back. He is back. So I want to make sure, can you hear us?
Do I got the robot voice?
No, you're good. You're good.
You bet. Yeah. We were trying, man. It was like, we can't make it out. But just in general, man, your thoughts just on Jubilee has put forth a really good show. Congrats, Jube. This is really good.
Good job, Jubilee.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's around gifted and talented, and just a general theme, bro, where we've landed and where we are is like, do you feel like it's an acceleration for students, Or do you feel like it's further marginalization? And since we hadn't been able to have you for a minute, we want let's give you some space on it.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. So I think what I was saying, and follow me for a second here, is I always go back to my niece Alea, right? So like Alea is my niece. Her parents are lawyers. They went to like really prestigious schools, right? So homegirl had an extraordinarily accelerated vocabulary by the time she hit kindergarten, right? So then what happens? As a result of her literacy acumen, as a result of her vocabulary, which is just a direct result of what she grew up around, right? She then gets tracked into some of these like gifted and talented programs, right? When I was growing up as a kid, I was one of the only brown kids in a gifted and talented program. Why? Because like my mom was savvy enough to be like, as a teacher, this is where like a lot of the great instruction is happening, which I think you all just mentioned, where like a lot of the teachers who've kind of like paid their dues and are really, really good turn out to be teaching the group of kids that, to be perfectly honest with you, don't need the best teacher. Those kids who are severely behind deserve the best instruction. And sadly, what's going on is that because you paid your dues, you get rewarded with like teaching gifted and talented, right? So then what happens is that you're eliminating excellent teachers from, I think, the kids that need it. But then what's happening is that these kids are getting tracked, not necessarily because they're, quote, gifted and talented intellectually, but really because they've had this constructs at home and the literacy levels at home due to, the wonderful privilege of being raised by educated parents or by savvy parents, and therefore put into these programs and that's sent on an extreme trajectory towards success. I mean, like, Doc, you're a doc. That's amazing. Jubilee, like, has done every job as an administrator in a school and is one, I would arguably say, one of the best damn consultants right now coming out of the gate in the United States. Like, hey, listen, like, I'm not doing shabby myself, but what I'm getting at is that we make this very large scale problem or discrepancy between kids who have the constructs like literacy and language in order to be in gifted and talented programs versus kids who are intellectually quick and adept. And therein lies the massive differentiation in gifted and talented programs and the wall. And that wall is set up on purpose, in my opinion. Because like, again, I walked into those classrooms and I'm in a town of 85% Latino kids or 85% Latinos, and like everyone in gifted and talented is white except for me. It's basically, as Charles, you said, it's here are the parents who are savvy enough to know that the school within the school is going to hyper accelerate my child, and people love that exclusivity factor. They want to be behind that rope. They want to be in that exclusive club. They want their kid in that exclusive classroom. So then what it does is it's not just a good teacher. It's not just good curriculum. What it's doing is creating an exclusivity factor in these kids to be like, I'm the best. And now they're getting convinced that they're the best. And then what happens with kids outside of that program is they're convinced I'm dumb. Despite the fact that their intellectuality, their ability to do tier 2, tier 3 questions, you're talking about the top of Bloom's taxonomy, the top of like intellectual ability, regardless of reading level, is probably quite high, but they've been marginalized to the side. So my big thing is like what we try to do at EPLA, again, it's all experimental, guys. We're not perfecting it yet, is I want to see special education strategies used on every child. I want to see bilingual ed strategies used for every child. I want to see gifted and talented strategies for every child. Because here's the deal with gifted and talented kids. They're self-learners, correct? And it's not because they're necessarily gifted and talented. It's because their parents have set them up with enough autonomy and constructs to be like, you don't really need the teacher. You can teach yourself this shit, which is literally what I did in 90% of my classes. So like, did I need a gifted and talented program? Hell no. Was it helpful for like kids to be like, I feel intelligent because someone is putting me on this track? Yeah, maybe. Absolutely. But what would happen to gifted and talented kids outside of the program? I don't know what I did. They'd probably be, entrepreneur and be like, I'm going to ace this class and get the hell out of here and be totally cool with it. Maybe some other kids have like the need to be, I don't want to say coddled, but basically like reinforced, emboldened that they're smart. But y'all read Dweck, y'all know Carol. Like, you
Yeah,
know what I'm talking about with growth
I'm
mindset. And like,
Go jump in, Ju. Ju, there you go. Ju just
no,
jumped
jump
in.
in. Come on, Emma. I
Congratulations,
like it.
Ju.
Jumping in.
Omar got me all riled up. He got my Brooklyn out. Okay, this was me last Friday at my son's school.
I can't wait, man.
Okay.
I can't wait to bring my
But
Texas out to your Brooklyn.
oh, let's go. But let me tell you something, because I just I know Charles is always talking about me being altruistic and all that, right? But like, to me, this is what Omar said, what it looks like in real time, right? And I think I told this story before, like when we got down to Maryland and I realized that they still track kids down here. My kids have never been tracked. They've always, right? Like they accelerated in school and done well, etc. But the only reason I ever switched their school was because I didn't think that the teachers were going to be able to give them what they needed, right? It wasn't because of a program or what have you. Like, that's what I look like. Like, are there excellent teachers doing excellent things in classrooms? Cool. If they're not, then we got to go. My son, my 13-year-old, went to a school in Brooklyn called Eagle Academy. Shout out to my colleague and friend, Rashad Mead, doing great things. It is a 6th through 12th grade all boys school in Brownsville, Brooklyn. That's where Mike Tyson's from. Okay. There's no gifted and talented in there, but you want to hear the language, the conversations, the Socratic method. You want to see these projects. You want to see the differentiation, right? Mm-hmm. All up and down no school, the school hallway. And they're serving all kids, IEP, not IEP, or what have you, because it was about the level of teaching, right? Yeah. When we got down here, I had to sit my sons down. I said, what? They got a 801, 802, 803, 804, 810. I had to sit them down and I said, listen, it's a little different down here, right? And they have gifted and talented.
You gotta explain what that means to people that don't work in education.
Okay, so basically the tracking is like they track based on test scores, and they group students by what they get on the test. So my kids didn't have any data down here, and even though my son had a weighted average of like 96 whatever, right? Now his GPA is a 4.14, like across the year, right? That didn't mean anything because they didn't have data for him. So they just put him in the lowest class. So I had to sit them down and be like, listen, they do gifted and talented here. It's not the same. They're not going to put you, in a class that's going to make you feel like you're accelerating and learning things. I was like, you got to just go into school and make it do what it do, right? I said, I don't care. Just your work will speak for you. Go make it do what it do. This is day one of school. My son comes back home, and to Omar's point, he goes, yeah, some kid was like, that's why you're in 808 or 809 or whatever, and used it as a thing. And it's like, again, I get it. That kid, he's being a kid or teasing and taunting, but it was very much about the exclusivity. We're in this club, this gifted and talented special club, right? And I had to tell them, the second thing I told them, the first was sit down and make it do what it do. Let your work speak for you. The other thing is, smart is something that you can get. Effective effort. That's a whole nother show, right? Smart is something you can get. Intelligence is something that you can build. Yes, we all, are born with some innate abilities, but intelligence is something that can be grown. That is what I believe, and that's what I teach my sons. And through that, they felt empowered to go against any kid, right? My son just got an offer to go into gifted and talented last week after being in the lowest classes. I said, your work's got to stand for you. So that's all I want to say, connecting with Omar.
Wait, I thought you said the school didn't track it all. There's tracking. Oh, I thought you said I thought you said that they were at a school that didn't track it all.
No, they do track, but that's my problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. They do. They definitely track. And my sons, because they had no data, they put them in the lowest class.
I know we're in the last 10, but David, I think I see you looking at that time at Toya's comment. Go ahead, bro.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant comment. I think this comment around the parent piece, because if parents aren't educated and parents aren't like leaning in and holding schools accountable, schools are going to do what they're going to do, right? Without any, with no friction, right? Unless people are causing friction. The other piece was, and I'll be quick because I want to hear from Omar too. Is it was very interesting. Like we're talking about, the segregation that happens in cities, segregation that can happen within schools around gifted and non-gifted programs. And then, I talked about it could segregate like what the teacher dynamic is too, which teachers get to teach what kids and what teachers get to teach other kids. And then you also have this thing where we're in the gifted program or the Padilla program at Oakland Tech, for example, right? Well, I'm a parent, so guess which parents I'm going to start rolling with, right? The parents of other kids that are in this gifted program, and you start to see the roots of segregation outside of the school system. It's being planted and seeded within the school system when we have these differentiated tracks. So that's kind of a frightening thought, but it's been happening for a long time.
And I think just to even tag that, I think part of what you said, Jubilee, I think it was a beautiful story. And I also think it's a frustrating story as we just saw from Miss Toya, right? Like you have so much knowledge about education. Like you have so much you know what I'm saying? And she wrote it. I think if you can go back to it where, any of those, right? Like my mom was a high school dropout who was trying to better her life and not be a drug addict no more. It's like, yo, go work hard and go do this. And I expect this from you or whatever. But you were very specific because you know this lane. And this is why, I don't know. Sometimes you got to think like a fox a little bit, right? Like where it's like, okay, how do I just strategically, what is happening here? And I think therein, like they said, lies the problem. This is why these programs will never go away. And I'm gonna shut up a little so Omar can get in here before we go into final thoughts. But schools break down into at least 3 different lands. Gifted and talented is one of those lands that we talk about where it's like, okay, teachers somewhat want to have you a little bit more because they're expecting better behavior. You a little further behind. I ain't got to deal with some of the stuff that I got to deal with, and I get to hang my hat on you. Yeah. That's 1. 2 is just no track. I mean, just, traditional, wherever you are, right? This is where you go. This is the kid that has a C average that if they don't say anything can go a full 4 years without ever seeing the office and nobody even knowing who they are, whether somebody checks in on them to see if they graduate or whatever. They got no behaviors, they fine. And then special ed, 1.5 below GPA kids, 1, because they offer a threat in the sense of we don't know if they're going to come to class. And this is I'm still thinking in an ADA heavy society. David talked about ADA being suspended in some places for now. But I remember working in the district and it's like, oh, if this person has this type of grade score, we kind of expect them to be chronically absent. We can't have to be chronically absent. So I need you to do, and they build plans around those kids, right? This is this is Westeros, man. This is some Game of Thrones stuff. And I think that what you just said is really, really dope and awesome as an educator that knows how to navigate.
Yeah.
And what I'm talking to is these parents like Toya, that's like, yo, I volunteer at the school. I want to get involved, but I'll never know all the lingo. They'll always have a step up. Like, what do I do? I just wanted to empathize with that exasperated feeling that a lot of people are having. And part of the reason that gifted and talented won't go away because people understand what that is. They understand I want to get my kid in there and my kid will have a better chance if they're in that program. And that's one of the reasons I don't think it'll go away. But I actually love this topic. Go ahead, Ofo. Jude throws us in. Go ahead. We potting, brother. Go ahead.
Omar, go. Omar, go.
Look, to answer Toya, thank you so much for joining in. We love you. This is the point of the podcast. The point of the podcast and the point of our consultancy is to empower folks with knowledge that we have in order to support everybody in this country who ultimately isn't privy to this information or knows why these systems exist in the first place. And look, gifted and talented, y'all, is just it's an archaic system. Right? It's an archaic system that was built and predicated upon purpose-driven segregation to be these kids going to make it and these kids don't. And look, I don't want any of the 3 of y'all to even front on the fact that you haven't worked in schools where teachers are like, these kids gonna make it, and these kids they're screwed.
Mhm.
That's how the teachers feel. That's
Yep.
how the teachers feel. So like imagine
Yeah,
the
man.
systemic roots of like gifted and talented and where that comes from and angry parents and why it exists and everything else that's there to like placate those group of parents who are extraordinarily loud and want that school within a school system. And I'm with you, Charles. There are massive tiers at every single school of kids that exist in one place or the other. And what I think is the tragedy of the American education system is that you've got black and brown kids who are extraordinarily intelligent, who are very bright, who probably don't have the background, don't have the parents, don't have the vocabulary, don't have the savvy, who are languishing, bored out of their minds in these other classes, who should by every right be in a quote gifted and talented program that's challenging them intellectually, not challenging them on what gifted and talented programs often do, which is more work and a higher set of vocabulary. These are the good kids. We're going to give them more work. We're going to give them these fun projects, and they're not that intellectually demanding. Don't front. Don't tell me that these things are intellectually demanding. There is funding to make them intellectually demanding. That's why they're never going to go away. The state of Texas pays money for gifted and talented kids to get them into this like track and like this specific curriculum. But like, I got to tell you straight up from experience, I wish that curriculum was more intellectually rigorous. And I mean intellectually, that high level blooms that we're talking about, challenging kids cognitively. Because I guarantee you, if a school did their homework, David, Jubilee, you and I know when you test kids, they're testing through the roof, except for the fact that like, they're tracked differently. So you get those MAP scores back and you're like, whoa, this kid should be in Algebra 1. This kid should be at high level English and they're tracked this way. Well, what's going on here? And you know what's going on there. They're black and brown. They probably just blow off tests. And next thing you know, you find these like really group of intellectually stimulated kids who aren't receiving the services that they need to. Why? Because it's the loud parent. So Toya, I'm with you. Like, this is why we do our podcast, is to get everyone on this podcast the knowledge to ask the right questions, because this is why black and brown kids have been disparaged. It's because they look at us and they're like, you don't belong in this classroom. Like, because of your color of your skin, you can't meet these intellectual rigors. And like, of course we can. So I love talking about the gifted and talented talk, because like it often becomes another mechanism of segregation that I think people in power wish to hope and have as a mechanism for their own children, because they know the system and others don't. So like, look, we slipped through the cracks, good for us. You slipped through the cracks, good for us. But it ain't sitting here as a mechanism to support all kids. And that's what I believe in. We should be using the curriculum to support every child, because that's how to differentiate curriculum in a classroom. Give every kid the gifted and talented strategies. And then you'll find out the kids that can like deal with that rigor and that challenge. And those who choose that don't do.
I'm with that. I think that is.
Ju, are you keeping an eye on your private chats, Ju? The producer notes. You got a private chat. It's okay.
Okay.
Hit that. No, we got you.
Throw a stat out there, but that's okay. Go ahead.
You throw your stat out and then throw us to. You throw your stat out and throw us to final.
Close this out. Close this out.
You gotta throw us the final thoughts. It's all good.
Let's go into final thought. I'm sorry. I don't want to be touching my phone because I don't.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Like, oh God,
I forgot that you're shooting on your phone. Let's go ahead and go into final thoughts. We'll end with you, Jubilee. David, let's start with you, and we'll just go around the horn and end with you.
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts. This has been a great show. It's gotten me like thinking about things that I wasn't thinking about before, and maybe I hadn't even like thought about. And so one of those things is We talk about like gifted and talented programs in schools, 10 to 15% of kids, maybe on average. And you think about the backgrounds of those children, their parents. I'm just thinking about for sure, yeah, schools want to maintain these programs. They don't want to end these programs and lose enrollment because that's revenue for the school. And at the same time, there's probably a study out there that shows that a higher percentage of parents who have children in gifted and talented programs, serve on the booster clubs and the PTAs and are actually doing work for the school and bringing in revenue for the school. So there's this self-interest for schools, regardless of what's good for the kids or not, to maintain these programs just around the simple economics of it all, which is a very crazy thing to think about. And then number two, I was tracked into gifted programs and advanced coursework when I was in school, in high school. And, I would say like half of the classes that I was enrolled in, by the time the winter came around, I was removed from the courses, not because of my inability to do the work, but because of, some of the behaviors that I was, putting out there. I was a very challenging young person. And I was like, what about those kids? The kids that actually can handle rigorous coursework and advanced coursework, but may have some kind of behavior issues or not behavior issues, but I just thought my teachers were boring. And it's I can't believe you get to do this job, and we're sitting here reading this book and teaching ourselves. And so I just kind of made a theater of the whole thing, and they quickly removed me and put me in the mainstream with the masses, with the people in the chat, and those are my people. That's where that was my experience. And I think the last thing is, it's interesting because we're talking about structures and how to change structures, but I think it all comes down to, I don't know if it's possible within the current structure to maintain these programs and have them be equitable for all kids. I think we need to rethink the entire system and move towards a more individualized, personalized, competency-based, proficiency-based system, and allow children and young people the room to explore and advance and stay in particular areas as long as they're moving forward with more autonomy. And that means essentially blowing up the whole 6-period day and the 30 student classroom. And I think that, thinking about what the work that the Big Picture is doing, right? Big Picture Learning and other organizations, similar organizations. I think there's promise in that. I think it's very risky for big systems to, try and make that transition, but I think it's coming, especially with all the talk around school choice. If you want to keep students enrolled in your system, you have to offer more choices for students within a school, and also do the work to make sure that you're not, segregating within your own school. So I'll leave it there. I got a lot more to say, but I want to hear what you have to say. Thank you, Jubilee, for bringing this forward.
Yeah, good job, Ju. Oh,
yeah. Look, I want to echo what David said and not spend too much time on this. There's a factor of segregation that I'm not particularly okay with right now in the general state of gifted and talented education. And I think that these strategies can be used all across the table. But you hit a chord, David, and I want to echo that chord, which is exactly why I believe charter schools exist, why I run a charter school, why the South Star Classroom exists, is because there's a research and development that we should be doing in education in order to rethink the entirety of the 6-period day, of old tracking systems, of anachronistic systems. Look, guys, the systems have been around for 50, 60, 70, 100 years. And I get it. The big systems can't blow it up, but I can. South Star Classroom can. Pilot schools can. And the thing is that this is the conversation that we were having previously about a little bit of a sneak preview. What we're going to be talking about at the Charter School Growth Fund conference is that ultimately that these old school power structures have existed for so long, but who is organizing and who is getting together and challenging them. Because it's one thing for David to challenge those constructs in person and being like, I'm smarter than my teachers and I'm smarter than these constructs. And now I'm getting kicked out of gifted and talented education. It's another thing for us and our audience and those of us who are leaders to band together and actually start challenging these systems, and not only challenging them, but experimenting and devising brand new ways of doing things, which is exactly what EPLA does, exactly what the South Star Classroom is advocating for, and saying, you're too afraid to challenge old constructs, but we're not. You're too afraid to do what's best for kids because it's going to shake and rattle the political structures of which you exist in, but we're not. And when we do find the solutions and we do find the code, we're going to absolutely eviscerate all of these old systems and all these old tracking systems and antiquated ideologies like gifted and talented education into a holistic and systemic improvement for kids across the country that is going to give those strategies to everybody and allow highly intellectual kids to meet that rigor, and then have other kids start getting challenged to that rigor because they're finally being introduced to something that isn't the boilerplate BS that they're getting fed in order to feed them into what is like the prison, the school to prison pipeline. I know that's very heady, but like it's time for a revolution. And like gifted and talented is just another construct to demonstrate how the old school paradigms of segregation are still existent in our school systems. And I'm like ready to blow it up. And I'm ready to propose something different, and I'm ready to get egalitarian, and like damn be the consequences, because one of these days I'm going to get shot for saying and doing these things. And I'll be okay with that. And I'll be okay with that.
No, God.
This has gotten morbid. Yeah. Well,
Got dark.
I have to follow up death. I'm gonna put this on for mine. I'll just say this is why we having this conversation. I got it right on my third child, and I hear people say this a lot. And we are in a system where parents, grandparents, guardians have to, for all intents and purposes, sacrifice children like to it. Like that is what we are up against. This is not. We are in it, education is a real wilderness, and if you watch any nature show. And if you particularly watch nature shows with kids, you will understand how gruesome nature and wilderness is. Because at some point, some weaker animal is going to get eaten by a much stronger animal, which is probably going to be hunted by a larger animal. And we don't like to confront these things. This public education system eats up our kids. It eats them. It devours them. And some people make it and some people don't. And so, you know, gifted and talented is a tool that some people in that wilderness have learned how to utilize, and it has bastardized other people. I am grateful, and you should all be grateful that we have the Omars, the Davids, the Jubilees, the education advocates that work in this stuff and that have a real beautiful vision of what could be. I'm a survivalist though, man. I hate that I have to be that, but the people that I tend to care about the most, that I tend to work with, that's just the place that they're in. They are trying to not have to sacrifice 2 children before they understand what's happening on the third. They are trying to respect a system that doesn't respect them. And they are expecting this system to do the things that they get paid for. And what I'm just trying to do is just say, look, sometimes you got to think like the fox. You got to be able to sniff out, you know, what's happening in the wilderness, because it's a place where a lot of people trying to survive. And I hope this episode was helpful for people. That's my final thought as Jubilee takes us all the way out.
Woo, what a topic. So just a couple of things. On the parent side, I want to thank you and Dave for lifting that need, right? For parents to kind of know how they should address something like this, right? Without the background. But I think really the foundation is just knowing that your child deserves the best, period, wherever they are, right? And it's not, a program is not needed for that, right? And so just on the baseline, just being able to know that your child deserves that and ask the questions, right? Because even without a program, if your child doesn't have a great teacher, being that inquisitive parent, being that demanding parent can at least get your child moved into a class with a better teacher, right? And I know that there's a bunch of caveats and nuances that we don't have time to discuss now, but I think the basic point is just know that your child deserves whatever they're given to, the quote unquote upper echelon, your child deserves too. And it's within your right to go out and advocate for that. And then in terms of GNT, honestly, I want to be like, throw the whole thing away. Throw the whole thing away. But if we must keep it, then I have a couple of suggestions. And of course, this is going to be for systems, Charles, so you can get me later, right? But like, let's adjust the assessments, right? And ensure that they're unbiased. What they are assessing for is not even what's taught in class, right? It really has nothing to do, right, with what children that end up being in gifted and talented classes are learning, right? So adjust the assessment, make sure that they're unbiased, right? And tuned in to uncover giftedness and multiple intelligences. And I know that's a long shot because there's a whole bunch of them. But the point is, let's stop telling kids that you're only intelligent if you show up in this way, right? Intellectually. There are other ways to show intelligences that we just don't give children space for or reward in the same way. Secondly, identifying the difference between high performing and gifted, right? Like the whole system says gifted and talented, right? But how do we know it's just not children that are high performing, right? And they just need to make sure that their teacher's able to meet them where they are to help them to continue to accelerate, right? These are not synonymous, high performing and gifted, right? And on the music side, I have a friend of mine that has perfect pitch. I consider that to be gifted. He can hear any note and say, "This is the note. This is the note." I think that's gifted, right? And so there's levels to it, and I think we need to be really clear on what that is. And lastly, I'd say moving from exclusivity to equitable, to the system being equitable, right? Like differentiation is needed, right? It needs to be the instruction that's happening needs to be relevant for whatever the students need, right? And this idea of we are special because we're in this class, we need to do away with it, right? Because it's not helpful for the esteem of our children, nor is it helpful for education. And that's my final thought.
You heard her. That's Jude. That's David. That's Omar. I am Charles. We will see you all next time. Same bad time, same bad station. Till then, y'all take care of each other and have a great week. Peace.